You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers about hikers for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, it's me again. This is episode number 448 of the Mighty Blue podcast, and I'm Mighty Blue, or Steve Adams. As I mentioned on our last week's show, I'm going to be out on the Appalachian Trail this week, and by the time you listen to this, I'm hoping to be somewhere near Blood Mountain. I plan on hammocking this week, so I'll let you know how it went when we meet up again next week. Today, though, we've got Sarah Zettler on the show. Sarah set herself the task of trying to section hike the Appalachian Trail during her summer vacation as a teacher. Those of you who've heard me before on the subject will know that I have a huge amount of respect for people who hit the trail with no trail legs, then bash out 500 miles before having to stop, go back to their real lives, then do it all over again the following year. I don't think I'm built for that, so I admire people who are. Sarah learned a lot along the way, faced a bit of adversity, yet finished it off at Katahdin this year. We're going to be hearing from Sarah in a moment. After Sarah, we catch up with the other three members of our Mighty Blue class of 23, the ones we didn't hear from last week. That'll be Sloggy, Lemonade and Professor Milkshake, with the two men fairly close to finishing, while Lemonade is hoofing it southward with plans of her own. Then, in Emily Leonard's Happy Hiking, I've got the second half of her Smokers experience, something that's always a special early part of the AT through hike, where I got a great feeling of accomplishment as I emerged from the northern section near Standing Bear Hostel. Great memories for me. So let's get going and meet Sarah Zettler, or Cricket. We've got a lady on the show today who finished up her Appalachian Trail multi-year hike a few weeks ago. This is Sarah Zettler, or Cricket. Hey Sarah, thanks for agreeing to come on the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And when did you actually finish?
I finished on August 3rd. I summited Katahdin on August 3rd and got down the Able Trail, and that was the big finish.
9 days. Wow, you know. How's it settling in that it's over?
It's sad. I feel
really?
like I need a new goal.
You wish there was a few thousand more miles to do, did you?
I do. I actually, on the airplane coming home, I looked up the International AT, and I was thinking I could just go ahead and finish that up.
Yeah, I can do that. It makes you feel I can do that all the time. Now, as I say, you've done the AT actually over 6 seasons, starting the year that I last through hiked in 2019. Where did this idea come from for you?
I think it came from summer camp when I was about 13 or 14. I went to a camp in Abingdon, Virginia, which was very close to Damascus, and the camp director's husband had a cabin on the AT. So he took us on a camping trip.
Nice.
And I think I remember being fascinated. It's hard to dive back into my 14-year-old brain at this point, but I remember thinking, wait, you can walk from Georgia to Maine, and it's all, your path is guided by that mark on the tree, and it just never really left me. And so
it's a pretty shocking realization when you think about it, isn't it? That
it's really shocking. That
incredibly thin. That was a shock for me. How narrow the trail is in many places. That it stretches all the way from Georgia to Maine. So when we spoke the other day, you said that the trail was calling you, and you said it was saying, "Come and see what you can do." Are you one of these people always up for a challenge, or was this a departure from you, from your regular life?
No,
Hang on. Hiking the trail is obviously a departure from your regular life, but are you the sort of person who gets called to do certain things?
Well, I do like a challenge. I like to see what I'm physically capable of, especially as I get closer to 50. But I don't do marathons. I did one Tough Mudder.
Did you?
I don't sign up for physical activity like I do hiking the Appalachian Trail. Hiking long distances is something I found that my body loves to do.
And this had grabbed you at the age of 13, you say? Was it 13 or 14? Right.
Yep.
And it had been with you for, you say you're nearly 50, so over 30 years, I suspect, or about 30 years. Did you always think to yourself, one day I'm going to do this?
I did, but it would come and go in and out of my mind. And then I had a coworker at the school where I was teaching who was section hiking it. And I thought, all right, well, now's the time because it's entered my consciousness again, full force. And so I did a little research for a year, watched a lot of Dixie and a lot of other YouTubers, and I started collecting gear. And I actually finished before my coworker, he's now in the whites. But he's going to finish probably in a couple years. And so my inspiration is behind me now.
Wow. That's interesting. What does he think? What he thinks about that? I'm sure he's absolutely delighted for you that you've done it, isn't he?
He is. I think he feels proud that he's my inspiration and the one that really encouraged me to do it and helped me with some of the logistical questions before I started. And so I think he's really proud of me, and I think he's looking forward definitely to going where I've gone. I'm
sure, yeah. But let's face it, you've now discovered this year that, the last miles you did, New Hampshire and Maine, is really where it's at the end, isn't it? That is such a tough finish, especially as a section hiker coming out and having to get your legs all over again, which must be so darn difficult.
It's beastly. I mean, that section, I made the mistake the year before coming out and thinking I could let the trail get me in shape. And it has gotten me in shape before, but you can't hike the Carters and the Wildcats and ask the trail to get you in shape. You better be on your A game when you hit Maine.
And you mentioned just now that you're a teacher. So this was, for you, always going to be a section hike. You're not one of these people who thought to yourself, when I'm retired, I'm going to do the whole thing in one go. You decided that you had to do it as a section hike. What did your kids at school think about this when you started? And have they kind of followed you along your journey?
Yeah, they have. I think they really find it interesting. Many of them have not heard of the trail, so they find it fascinating that there's a footpath from Georgia to Maine. They do follow along with me. The boys in particular, because a lot of them are Boy Scouts and they go out to
Nice.
Arizona and they Philmont and they are hiking. And so they kind of like get what I'm talking about when I talk about filtering water and seeing wild animals and hiking long miles. And so they ask a lot of questions and they're really fascinated by it.
And you actually incorporate in some of your class lessons, don't you?
Absolutely. I mean, when I teach essay writing, I write sample essays where I talk about the Appalachian Trail, and the kids are very engaged. They enjoy it a lot.
That's great. It's lovely to light that fire in somebody. You never know, in 15, 20 years' time, there'll be a youngster, because of what you've done, it's got them out on the trail. And I find that phenomenally inspiring myself.
Yes, I think that's the purpose of teaching. You want to give them the power to go forward and accomplish their goals and do their dreams. And I hope it's more than one kid. I hope a bunch of kids come back and say, guess what I did?
Yeah,
and I'm going
right.
to know. I'm not even going to guess wrong. I'm going to know what they did.
Have you got any in mind? See their reaction, do you think to yourself, that one's going to take this seriously?
Yes, I do have a couple in mind. Yep.
No names. Now, you mentioned you prepared for a year, and this was because you've not done any backpacking at all, and you started watching the various YouTube videos. What impression did you take away from the videos? That it was difficult or accessible, or there was a lot to learn? I mean, what were you gaining from these videos?
I think I found it all very accessible. Dixie was a go-to, and she's really likable.
Yes.
Everybody just gravitates towards her, and she makes things very accessible. And she's a teacher. So
Totally.
I watched her videos, and I learned how to filter water from her. She sampled gear, so she taught me about Z-packs, and I just learned so much from her. And from there, it was just like she was the center of the spoke on the wheel, and I just all my research.
Sure.
And it's February in Ohio, and you're dreaming about being on the trail, and so YouTube and podcasts and all that books, all that stuff sort of feeds your soul as you're waiting in anticipation for the last day of school.
So you learned what you needed from the YouTube channels and the gear you got. Did you go for the duplex?
I did.
So
yeah.
I'm still with mine. It's done about 4,000 miles now, and it's looking a bit shabby at the moment. It needs a bit of a tidy up, but I might actually have to get another one, which is kind of ambitious at the age of 71 to be getting another tent in it, really. But we'll see how I feel. And being a novice at the time, looking back, would you have changed your preparations anyway? Or, did the gear hold up?
Yeah, the gear held up really well. I don't think I would have changed any of my preparations because I did a lot of thorough investigations and, I did buy a Nemo tent and then I ended up taking it back. And so there were a couple things, but I never actually hit the trail with the Nemo tent. I did a shakedown hike with it and I just didn't, for some reason I had my mind on that Z-Packs ever since Dixie showed it to me.
Yeah.
So, and I loved that it was so light and, I'm not 20 something. I needed to collect lightweight gear. And
sure.
There was a time when I realized, hey, I should stop spending thousands of dollars on lightweight gear and maybe just lose 20 pounds myself. And so one summer I did that.
That's hilarious. Oh, that is funny. Sorry, you just totally throw me off my thought process. So when you got out there, funny enough, as I say, 2019 was my last through hike there, and I noticed there was a slew of Z-Packs out there. Did you find the same? Because you went later than me, obviously, because I went in February.
Yeah, there's a lot of people with Z-Packs. Now there's a lot of hyperlight packs. But I still see the duplex a lot. I see Durston tents a lot too.
Yeah, they look great
People are
as
really
well.
going in that direction, and those are great looking tents.
Yeah, they really
They're
are.
set up differently than the Z-Pack, so it's kind of cool how they're set up.
So what about the physical preparation for a long hike? You said you prepared for a year. Obviously, that was, I guess, to do with getting the gear, finding out what to expect and so on. But what about that physical preparation? What did you do?
So there were only 2 years I prepared physically. And that's the thing I would change. If I could go back and change something, I would prepare every single year at the gym ahead of time with a personal trainer, if I could, or just like downloading exercises for hikers online and mimicking them. Because the first year I did that, the first year I was a newbie, I was nervous, and I used that energy to really prepare with my personal trainer, who I saw like once or twice a week for a couple weeks or a couple months ahead of time.
Right, yeah.
And then there were 3 summers I did not prepare. I just thought the trail will get me in shape. And, I hiked a little bit, but I wouldn't call it preparation, like good preparation. And then the year that I really didn't prepare when I fell, then the next year I was like, all right, that terrain up there in New Hampshire and Maine is not kidding. It is not a joke. And you cannot just ask that trail to get you ready because it will chew you up and spit you out.
It needs your full attention. No question.
Yes.
It needs your full attention.
Yes. So I bit the bullet and I did a lot of working out.
You got prepared, so you did all the things one should do. I never do, by the way. I'm terrible. I sometimes pack on the day I'm leaving, which is ridiculous as well. What did I know your mother happily still around, and 5 years ago or five or six summers ago, she was around. What was her reaction when you said this is what you wanted to do?
I don't think she was particularly excited for me to do this.
You tell me she could. You're crazy.
She did not. She does not like me going into the woods by myself. She does not. It made her nervous. She's a mother, and she would rather have me at home with 4 walls surrounding me, and that just wasn't what I wanted to do. And unfortunately, sometimes when you have a goal in life, you have to make some people unhappy.
Sure.
But I did make sure that I was constantly calling her and updating her, and she had a policy: no snakes. She said, you call me, send pictures, but I don't want to see anything with snakes.
She had a policy. Yeah, good luck with that. So I'm pleased, obviously, that you finished, and she's still around to record you finished. How's it? Has her attitude changed over the years, or did you think she thinks my daughter's got this?
No, I don't think her attitude's changed. I think she is proud of me. She talks to her friends about me, and so I do know there is pride there. But I think she's like, oh, good, you're done. Now you can just be done and never walk in the woods again.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way. And were you nervous?
No.
Were you nervous, by the way, when you were about being in the woods by yourself?
Oh, yeah. Every time I walk into the woods, I get nervous.
Oh.
Even if I'm in the vortex at a hostel and I'm like, all right, I can't take another 0. I've got to go hike. I get nervous. I don't know why. It's just because, you're facing the unknown. You're going into the adventure. And so it's just a thing with me.
I always found when I first started back in 2014, my first ever hike, which was on the AT, turning around a corner was always a nervous thing for me, thinking I'm going to see some huge bear that's going to eat me in front of me. I mean, I got over it quite easily, but yeah, it was always a nervous thing to start with. And when did you get the name of cricket? I believe you named yourself, didn't you, before you went?
I did name myself. I was at Amicalola Falls, the hotel, and I was about to shower and hit the trail, and there was a cricket on my bath mat, and I had been there 2 nights and there had been no bugs in the hotel or anything. So I thought, all right, this is definitely a sign. Crickets have really strong legs, so I love that about them. The other thing is a cricket on the hearth is good fortune in many cultures. So I thought, all right, well, this is a message to me, and I need strength. I need to constantly remind myself of my own good fortune out there, and so I named myself Cricket.
Very cool, very cool. It's lovely how a trail name ends up fitting the person who got it, I suspect. That you feel comfortable in your name, and this is you can become somebody else for that short period of time every year. So what was the plan that first year?
The plan that first year was to hike from Springer to Damascus.
So that's about 400 more, 484, I think now, something like that. Yeah,
484.
And those early days in Georgia, how'd you find them?
Crowded. Georgia is a busy place.
Oh, hang on. It was crowded when you went, but you can only go in the summer holidays. So it was still crowded then, was it? Oh, interesting.
Yes. I think my first day was Memorial Day weekend. It was either Sunday or Monday. And I remember coming up to Three Forks and thinking, that there's a big waterfall there and a road there.
Yeah.
I was like, this is Disney World. There are so many people. And Georgia continued to have a lot of people in it. And it didn't really get empty until I crossed the border into North Carolina.
And you actually found North Carolina a bit tougher than Georgia, didn't you?
Oh, I did. Yeah. And there were some nights I had to camp by myself. And then the heat, it was very hot. And so it was a little desolate. And I had to have a lot of positive self-talk. I sprained my ankle in the Smoky Mountains pretty badly. Ooh. So I had to go into Gatlinburg, and they said it wasn't broken. So I told them I was hiking, and she said, well, if it fits in your shoe, you can go back out. Just wait a couple days. So that's what I did. And I walked from Clingman's Dome all the way to Damascus with a really fat, swollen ankle.
Wow. And you didn't do any permanent damage, obviously, because you then went back. So it was just basically a twisted ankle, was it?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So you got Damascus. And were there any things on that first year you look back on now and think, well, that was a pretty cool thing to do?
I think camping by myself.
All right. When did you do that first night? Which was the first night you did that?
I wish I could remember the name of the shelter. I'll remember it as soon as we stop talking. But
do you
remember that exposed ridge line that's AWOL talks about it?
They always seem to be exposed to me.
It's it's about 1.5 miles, I think, and it's out of Hot Springs. It's 2 days out of Hot Springs. There's an exposed ridge line. It was the shelter after that, but I was hobbling with my ankle, and I got to the shelter, and I was nervous because nobody else was there, and the sun kept setting, and I thought, okay, well, and sometimes it's not great to be there with just one person either, because you never know what kind of person you're going to be there with. Yeah. So that was the night I remember a cricket was actually singing by my tent. And I remember thinking, all right, as long as this cricket is singing, then I am totally fine. And if the cricket stops, then there's either like, you know how your brain
I'm gonna
goes into
freak out.
doomsday. Yes, there's either a bear or there's a human bear or, you know, something. But the cricket literally sang all night long. And that was, you know, that's why the trail's magic. It provides. And
that was your own bit of trail magic, which is pretty cool. So how did you feel getting off trail? Damascus, you know, 480 miles, you're really, really into it by then. You know, you are living on the trail for a period of time. How did you feel? I mean, you know, it was the goal for that year, but I'd imagine it was a bit of a wrench leaving it behind after 500 miles, nearly 500 miles.
Well, I wanted to see the ponies, and I didn't get that far.
No, you wouldn't have done, would you? No.
But I was excited to start with that the following year.
True.
I think I was ready to go home.
All right. Okay.
I think it was kind of like school was starting soon, and I had accomplished my goal. And it was hot out there, and I think I was a little bit homesick. I remember calling my sister from the top of Pond Mountain and saying, you know, like, I did a little blubbering, and I was like, I'm homesick. And so I persevered and finished my goal, but I was ready to go home. Right. I think I'm good for about 500 miles out there, maybe 550. And then I'm like, all right, I have a heat rash on my back. I can't feel my second toe on my foot. It's time to go home.
And of course, the following year was the COVID year. Did that give you pause at all about going back there? Because you go in July time or June or July?
I went at late May.
Oh, right. So COVID was really rocking and rolling by then, wasn't it?
It was.
What was your thought process there?
It was, I've got to go hike.
Oh,
I remember we were off school. We left school in March, and then we were teaching online.
Sure.
But I remember that whole spring thinking, I'm going hiking. I'm going hiking. I'm going hiking. And my state opened up that, you know, we could leave it. And so I left it, and I figured walking into the woods was probably better than being in the city.
Probably safer. Almost certainly safer, yeah.
I stayed in hostels that year. I breathed the air of other people, but since it hadn't hit the small towns yet, it was totally fine. I had no problem at all. I think it was a good experience because there were less people on the trail, and that's probably the year I would have been directly in the bubble. I'm not quite sure, maybe a little behind the bubble.
And did you that second year, did you notice changes in yourself as a hiker? Because when I went the second time, I immediately knew where I was, and I knew exactly what I was doing because I had that experience of doing it before. Yes. Even though it was 2,200 miles, you still had 500 miles experience. So did you get that feeling, I'm good, I know exactly where I'm going here? Yeah,
and that's why I didn't work out. That's why I was like, the trail will get me in shape, no big deal. And it did.
Yeah. So however pretty the ponies are, by the way, that's a work. Yeah. Grayson Highlands is a workout itself, isn't it?
It is a workout. And I did that section with my sisters and my niece and nephew, and we had a really good time with the ponies.
Were they the highlights? Were the ponies the highlights that year?
Oh, totally. The ponies were so fun.
So you got you got to Harper's there, didn't you? Was it Harper's you got to?
I actually got to the northern end of Shenandoah.
Oh, okay.
And I went back on fall break. We have a day or two off in the fall. And then, so I was trying to get up to Harper's Ferry, but I made it to the Blackburn Trail Center. And then spring break, I went back and finished that last bit.
So in 2021, you went from Harper's then to Massachusetts for another 500 miles, which is a great way of doing it, I must say. Were you noticing, and have you noticed changes in other hikers since you've been doing it over this period of 6 years or 6 sessions, as it were?
I was definitely around more through hikers as I got further north each summer because they were further north.
Of course, yes.
But they were really welcoming to me, and we all had the same aches and pains. I actually became good friends with quite a few through hikers, and we hiked a lot together. No, I didn't really notice a change other than, I mean, they're very open to me. They were very respecting of my lash, my past lashes and my current lash.
Damn right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
This is a proper hike. You've gone out and
yes.
done 500 miles 3 straight years. That's way more than most people could ever do. And to just get the mental fortitude together to go out there again. Because I'd imagine, were there times you thought, yeah, I'm not sure I really want to do this at the moment? Did you ever start thinking, oh God, another 500 miles to do?
Oh, sure. Like, it's raining and all your gear's wet and you're thinking it'd be so easy to get home. But then, you think, well, I have this goal. And actually, I would post on Facebook a lot during my hikes. And I had this following of people who were supporting me and encouraging me. And I really didn't feel like I could get online and say, guess what? I'm going home.
Yes.
It never occurred to me to do that, except that 2021, I wanted to go from West Virginia to Vermont, because being an English teacher, I like the alliteration. I did not make it to Vermont, but so I did have to just go home, and it ended up being still 511 miles I hiked that summer.
Wow.
And that's the summer I had heat rash on my back, and I was like, all right, it's time to go home and just take care of myself.
Sure. So that leaves 22, 23, and 24 to finish off. What happened in 2022?
2022 was a great year. I started in Massachusetts, and I finished at Pinkham Notch.
All right. So that was
Yeah.
250, about 250 miles. Why the
Yes.
shorter mileage then?
Well, the terrain is just so much more difficult. I had these grand designs to finish the whole trail that year, and I told my students, I was like, I might do it. And so they came back in the fall and they were like, did you do it? And I was like, no, I wish I did, but it was just so much more difficult. And so I just couldn't accomplish all of it.
And another thing I was still thinking about when I was preparing these questions, how lucky you've been not to have been injured in those first 4 years, because separate hikes, all those miles, and you've not really been injured at all. Unfortunately, in 2023, which you would have thought would have been the year you'd finish, tell us why it wasn't.
Well, 2023 was not a good year up north. It was raining, It was cold, and I left in June, early June, like June 5th or something. And I remember thinking the year before, as I was waiting for the bus at Pinkham Notch, looking across the road, I remember thinking, that's the hardest day, or the hardest hike in front of me, because I had Googled it. What are the hardest day hikes on the AT, or what's the hardest section? And they all mentioned the Wildcats and the Carters. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to start the trail next year with the absolute hardest section.
That's the spirit.
And then I was like, all right, well, that's what it's going to be. So I did, and I did not work out. I was cavalier. I figured I can do what I do every other year. The trail will get me in shape. Muscle memory will kick in. So then the rain kicked in, and the cold. It was so cold. And my friends and I, we hiked the first day like 7 miles to Carter Notch Hut. And it was not fun. It was raining and it was cold and it was not fun. And there were parts of it that felt really sketchy, especially for someone who had 0 trail legs.
Yeah.
And then
that is a dangerous start. That is a real dangerous start.
The next day we made it to Imp Shelter, and I remember my friends saying, I'm thankful, but also very surprised that nobody was hurt today, because again, it was raining and cold, and that the section is treacherous. And then the last day I was coming down, and I had not read up a lot on crossing rivers, although I knew better than what I did. We got to the Rattle River, and we rock hopped across it. And it was boulders, really. It wasn't like they were not close to the water.
Sure.
And I don't know what happened. I got distracted, something. I wasn't like as athletic as I could have been because I didn't work out. And I think I pinned my pole behind a boulder trying to steady myself, and my wrist was in the loop. And so when I fell, my arm stayed behind me, and my face just went like teeth first into a rock.
Wow.
And it was, I sat up immediately and I looked at my hands, and I remember like my teeth were, I said to my friends, I think I've lost my teeth. And then I was feeling with my tongue. They were there, but there was blood on my hands mixed with rainwater, and I was half in the river. And then they had me sit up on a boulder. And immediately when I sat on the boulder, I started to feel like I was going to pass out. And I think I might have said, I'm going to pass out. And then I passed out. And I woke up a short while later, and I remember thinking, am I still in the shelter? Like, am I looking at the rafters? But I was looking at the branches of trees above me. And luckily I was with someone who was a retired emergency room doctor.
Wow.
And physician's assistant.
Trail provides.
Yes, the trail provides. And they stabilized me. And it's interesting because it took my Garmin an hour to get a satellite signal, my SOS button, to work, because the clouds are so thick. And it wasn't until like 55 minutes into that hour where I said to them, if you press both sides of my cell phone, you're going to be able to send out an emergency signal. And one of them had run the 3 miles down to the road, Route 2, and he got a signal there. But my cell phone, it worked, like the pressing both sides for the SOS signal. So they were able to get through. And then 5 minutes later, my Garmin was able to send the SOS. So that was a learning experience.
I bet it was, itself. Yeah.
And I waited there on that riverbank for 3 hours for a search and rescue team. And I think something like 14 people came out. I mean, and all I had was the vision of what was like above me, because I couldn't move my neck. My friend Marty had secured my neck because it was kind of sore, as it should be when your face hits a rock. And I had a cut on my forehead too, and my wrist hurt and my leg hurt. And so he sort of secured me in. He took my tent and wrapped it around my head to like keep my head stable. And my friend Lampshade and Marty, they waited, and then my other friend Speedgoat ran to the road. And so I waited. 14 people, search and rescue from Androscoggin, search and rescue team. They came out. And I'm getting chills just thinking about it, because these people, I mean, who does this? Who comes out in the freezing rain up the mountain?
Good people.
To save someone.
Yeah.
And I had just purchased a hike safe card 2 days ago because, New Hampshire offers that. And I had not purchased one the year before when I hiked the majority of the Whites, because I didn't know it existed. So these people, they reassured me. They were so sweet and kind. They put me in a litter. Someone was carrying a big fat tire on her back, and I could see her in my line of vision as she like stepped in front of me. And I thought, I wonder what she's going to do with that tire. But they ended up putting it under the litter. And I remember I asked my friend to take a picture of me, and I did post it on Appalachian Trail section hikers. And I was smiling in the picture because there's part of my intuition. I knew I wanted to remember this moment, that this was going to impact me in a big way down the line. And I was so lucky, like when you hit your head on a rock, you break your front tooth, you get 10 stitches. I broke my wrist. It could have been so much worse.
Yep.
But I just met these search and rescue angels, and even the doctors. I didn't know what an endodontist was until I broke my front tooth. I remember I went into the office all nervous, and they see these kind of injuries every day to the front, two front teeth. They see them all the time. And so they were like, this is no big deal. Don't have anxiety. But of course, it was my first experience with that. So, but I met all these trail angels, even when I was off the trail, that helped me heal. And the following year, the first thing I was going to have to hike was that Route 2 to Grafton Notch. And that's Mahoosic Notch and Mahoosic Arm. And that's the second hardest thing, or, aside from Katahdin, and the third hardest thing. So I learned a lot. I definitely learned a lot that summer.
So you got out this year. You recovered, obviously, and people looked after you. And I'm glad you gave a shout out to the trail angels who just do amazing stuff. You know, they come out and they, as you say, who does that sort of thing? Yeah, well, great, good people do that sort of thing. This year was your year to get it done. Talk us through that last day. You know, once you get above the trees, I can remember it well. Suddenly you got this vertical rock in front of you. It looks like,
Yeah,
you know, it's like we've arrived. You know, who's to have a problem? And then you climb up a bit, and you go a little bit flatter. Then you go onto the tablelands and so on. What was it like approaching that brown sign, which you've thought about, I guess, over the years? Now back for 5 years. So how do you feel when you were just approaching the sign?
I felt full and empty at the same time. My body was spent because I was so tired. Because the tablelands, you know, they're long, and you can see the sign from so far away, and you've just climbed up all the you've just done all the things, and you're just out of gas completely.
Yeah.
And you get to the sign, and it's like, how can a sign fill your heart so fully? But it did. And I cried. I took a video of myself walking up to the sign, not of me, but of the sign, and me talking. Yeah. And I was crying, and I didn't expect there to be such a vista on the back side of it, like a drop down. That was exciting for me to see. Knife's Edge was exciting for me to see, but the sign, like, this is the cherry on top. This is everything that you've been waiting for. And you're finally touching it. Oh, yeah. And, you know, your legs did it. Your heart did it. Your lungs did it. Like, all the parts. Your mind did it. And it's like, it's all encompassing. And it's so hard to describe. And it's so sweet when it takes you several years to get to.
One of the things you said to me, you realise you can do really hard things. And I'm sure that's something a lesson you try to impart to your students all the time. My word was accomplishment. I felt it was an accomplishment, and it's something nobody can ever take away from you. Do you feel other things changed in yourself?
I feel it was an accomplishment. I feel it was a feat. I mean, I did something major. And if you don't know the trail, you don't know how major it is.
That's right. I know. We can say it all we like. People and other people will say, well, it's just walking. It ain't just walking. It's so much more. And you meeting all those trail angels and referring to them who made your life that little bit better. Even that bloody cricket sleeping outside your tent, keeping you safe. I think that's a wonderful trail angel to have had with you that night. So you got there. You got down, which I always think is the hardest part of Katahdin, getting back down again. What's next? Are you going to do another long hike? Are you going to do something else in sections? Or are you going to wait till you retire and then do a long one then?
No, I like hiking. I like long distance hiking in the woods. I like feeling my own strength building every day. Sure. And I like getting my trail legs. And so I've got to find something. I love the AT trail community. And I'm fearful that I will go hike something else and it won't have the same community vibe, and I'll be like, well, I got to go back to the AT because those are clearly my people.
That's why I went for a second time, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, and third and fourth, and I could see myself hiking my whole life on it, or owning a hostel, or doing something to help hikers because those are my people. And the real world to me is the trail, because that's where we're all finding our inner strength and we're persevering every day. And we do it in real life, but there's also so many creature comforts in real life that we can sort of like attach ourselves to, like the couch and Netflix, and we can turn off
binge watching.
Right. We can sort of just like say, okay, well, yes, I have all these things I need to do, but I'm just going to sit here and watch Netflix. And I find I'm most proud of myself when I'm walking around in the woods in the rain. That's cool. Or climbing something I didn't think I could climb.
I saw your post on Facebook. It was really beautifully done. And I might even, if you're happy to, I might even post some of it on the show notes. But
sure.
in the interim, thank you so much for coming on and sharing a story. And as my listeners always know, that I always think through section hiking is way harder than through hiking, because you've got to do it again and again and again and get your legs each time. So hats off to you, and I appreciate you coming on and telling us about it.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure. I look up to you.
Well, to be fair, I'm taller than you. Okay, well, good to talk to you. Okay, take it easy,
Thank
okay?
you so much. All right, bye-bye.
Bye. I really enjoyed talking with Sarah. She knew that the 500-mile mark was her number, and that was enough to give her 80 fix, while at the same time fitting into what she saw as the right hike for her. Knowing what works for you is half the battle, really. It made me smile when she talked about being cavalier about the wildcats and the carters. You just cannot do that. In many parts, you look up, you think, how on earth am I going to get up there? They're daunting, and I can think of few places that I'd less like to start an AT section. Still, she did it. Also, of course, big shout out to the emergency rescue team from Androscoggin. That sounded like a nasty injury, and Sarah felt cared for and professionally taken to safety. Wonderful, though I have to wonder why the Apple phone worked better in the emergency than the Garmin. Let's move on now and catch up with Bobby Campbell, or Sloggy.
Hello.
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
Hey, good, Steve. How's it going?
Oh, too bad. Where are you right now then?
I am at, you're going to laugh, I'm at a ski resort in Bethel, Maine.
Of course you are. you're totally platinum blazing it now, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a friend of mine owns a timeshare up here, and we had
Nice.
got him to pick us up at a trailhead to take us into Bethel, and he's like, "Oh, you might as well just use my timeshare."
Silly not to. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, it's got a sauna right inside it. So.
Oh dear. Just actually, sauna's fantastic when you're hiking, so I'm sure you had to go at that already.
Yeah, we will. We're just in the midst of doing laundry and everything. We got off trail there just a few hours ago. So
Right.
We'll get
How
to
many
it
of you
for
are
sure.
there? How many of you are there right now?
There's me and the couple from the Isles off British Columbia, Econoline and Dixon.
Nice. So you sent me a little text and you said Mount Madison 1, my knees 0.
Yeah.
That is not a good scoreline.
No, I'll tell you, the last time I did Madison, I did it southbound, and I'm like, oh, that was easy. But I'll tell you, after going from the Mizpah hut up to Washington and then across and down that 2.5 mile hike down
It's
Madison.
endless, isn't it? Bloody endless.
At the end of the day, it was dark. I was almost ready to pull out my headlamp, and it was endless. And the trail's not. I mean, it's marked, but it's a lot of hunting and pecking for steps, you know.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a pretty dangerous place. I mean, I can't. Did you do it in the dry?
Yes, thankfully it was dry. Yeah, so we talked about that. How lucky we were that it was dry.
Yeah. And you actually said that it's the second time you thought about quitting.
Yeah, well, that there wasn't because of that. It was. And it was a very fleeting moment, but my wife picked us up at Pinkham Notch.
Right.
And then drove us into North Conway to spend the night. And it was the first time I'd seen her since April 8th.
Sure.
And, which was not, a great reunion. And I had a friend, one of the guys I was hiking with videotaped it. And I actually got a lot of nice feedback from friends who said they watched when we met each other again. And they all texted me and said that they didn't cry, which, I thought was funny.
Did you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was not seeing your spouse or partner for 4 months is
yeah.
It's something.
It's a wrench.
But
it's a wrench. People need to be aware of that when they go on this trip. They're away for a long bloody time, so they need to be ready for what it's going to be like.
Well, I texted you that, and I'm like, well, do you really want to talk about quitting? But I think it's I think doing this. To be honest about it, to give people that perspective, because she left the next day and she said, I don't even know if I should have come and seen you, because
Yes.
she was even more, you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. While it's great that people come and see you, it interrupts your flow in many ways. And, and if they hike with you as well, even more so. But, I think it's one of those things you just have to be prepared for when you're going out there. This is not as easy as it might seem to be, especially when you have to, when you have to say goodbye to somebody. That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, and I think, and it made me say, well, but I mean, I say that I thought about quitting, but I mean, because I just felt so bad for her. But she's back home now, and she's back in her, routine. And then we'll be, in a couple of weeks, we'll be to Monson here in, I don't know, a week and a half probably. So we'll see. And then I'm going to take a night and, and stay at my father-in-law's camp before we hit the 100-mile wilderness. And, it'll be over before we know it, honestly.
Yes, that's
kind
right.
of scary, really.
Yeah, don't wish it away. And you've done the Mahoosuc Notch. Have you done that before, by the way?
Yes, I did it southbound, but I'll tell you, it wasn't many years ago. But boy, I'll tell you that is tough, and it was pouring rain.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't like to do that in the rain either. Actually, yeah, you had to pull yourself up quite slick rocks, didn't you?
Yeah, there were some definitely. Luckily, Steve O'Connelline that I'm hiking with, he and his wife, they did the PCT 2 years ago, and he's done a lot of caving, in Belize and those areas. And I pretty much followed his line because there were some really tricky. And luckily I'm 6'3". Well, I say that, and some of the reaches and things that helped, but I had to take my pack off twice to get through some of those crawls.
I bet. I think you're meant to do that. I did that myself as well. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty tight in there, isn't it?
It is. It's really tight, and it's you don't use your arms a whole lot on the AT hike, and when you have to start pulling yourself up and things, you're like, yes. I've got a little weaker over the last 4 months.
Yeah, you've lost. Most men lose muscle in the upper half of their body, and the lower half becomes incredibly strong. I know I'd lost a lot of muscle. So I lost so much muscle. In fact, I could smell the ammonia on my in my sweat because I was losing so much muscle. I lost 60 pounds in weight as well. It was just a shambles, to be honest with you. And you mentioned a 0 day. Well, don't you have many 0 days?
I've taken 5.
Oh, okay, that's pretty good.
So where the day my wife left, the weather looked just terrible. So we stayed an extra day in North Conway, and I really needed it. It was, after doing Madison and things. So there was 5 of us together there. So we all took an extra day, and I just stayed in the hotel and iced my knee and watched Netflix and ate.
Isn't that a treat? Isn't that an absolute treat?
But I'll tell you, it's tough coming off a 0.
Yeah.
Back to the trail. You get back to the trail that day after a 0. I'm glad I haven't taken more because it was pretty tough to get back on the trail after sitting in the hotel room all day. You start to feel a little bit normal,
and of course, you've had a bit of bog walking up there as well, which is kind of interesting. Does that mean you fell in it or what?
Well, there's just those places like today, sometimes you can kind of get around them, but today we came over Mount Speck today. And there were just some alpine bogs up there. The boards were either buried under a foot of mud or disintegrated, and you just have to walk through. I mean, there's nothing you can do. You're just going to get your feet wet.
And you mentioned that you drew blood. Maine drew blood your first blood. I bled out of virtually every part of my body. So what happened to you then?
Well, I was coming. You try to get cute and go around some of those bogs, and I saw a little place that people had went, and it was muddy, and I fell, and it was just like a flume, and I think I went about 8 feet on my butt, and then put my arms out, and which was great. It stopped me, but my right elbow stopped me in that rock up here in Maine and New Hampshire. It just does not give, and it was bleeding and it kind of swelled up last night, but. Like I said, it's an upper body injury. So as long as I, keep walking, then I'll be fine. But
I know you said it's not long to go now. You've been months and a week and a half or so on. Has this experience of meeting your wife again and having the 0 day, are you kind of ready to be done now?
No. I hate to say no because I know my wife's going to listen to this, but. It's kind of you get torn. I mean, I've met a lot of thru hikers through the years in the 100-mile wilderness, and I tell you, it's weird. Most that I've met, and again, it's just me, but they just want to burn through that and end it. And I don't think I'm going to feel that way. It's been life changing for me in a lot of ways, and I think it's been good for me to be out here. And so, yes, I'm going to double answer you. I'm like, I wanted to keep going, but yes, I want to get back and see my family.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I'm not in a hurry for it, Dan, by any means.
No, I mean, you've had a lovely hike, really. In many ways, you've had a lovely hike. You've always sounded happy and positive, when I've spoken to you, and that's always good. And the fact that you're now back in your home ground, as it were, that must be kind of comforting for you as well. So I'm sure, you're going to enjoy these days. And doing the 100-mile wilderness, as you know already, is it's a real privilege to be able to do that in America, I think.
Yeah, it is. Well, I tell my friends I've been hiking with, like, and one thing that we've been talking about, and I told everyone that I've met ad nauseum, was like, don't take a big sigh of relief when you get through the whites. Like Western Maine will sneak up. Well, my friends, so they did the PCT 2 years ago, and they've done the AT up to this point, and they said that the last 2 days were the hardest 2 days that they've hiked on the AT this year.
Wow.
So, between weather and doing the Mahoosuc Notch and all the big elevation games. And so Western Maine is tough, I think, till, and you may agree a little with me, once you hit the Kennebec,
yes,
then you get,
yes.
right, just right to Caratunk there, and then at the 150-mile mark. I think the Western Maine is tough, but once you hit the Kennebec, after that, it's pretty enjoyable. So that's what I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. And in fact, after, I just remembered, I haven't talked about it much on the show, but I've talked about it in the past. After the Notch, there's the Mahoosuc Arm. You go up that, which is quite a mission. But even worse than that is the down from Mahoosuc Arm. It's bloody endless, isn't it?
Yes, it was. We did that this morning. We went up the arm this morning, and it was, I'll tell you, I'm not sponsored by Ultras, but I'll give them a plug. Boy, those things, because the rock, you know how sheer that is, that open rock.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
They were pretty darn sticky for me this morning, and I was glad, because I'll tell you, it was raining all today too. Going up that Mahoosuc Arm, and it was kind of a leap of faith on some of those foot placements. I got to be honest.
It is.
And then coming down,
absolutely.
as you say, the down was actually it stopped raining when we got to the summit of Spec.
Right. Nice.
But I've been sad because we didn't. The last 2 or 3 days we didn't get any views, and I know it's beautiful. But that's just the way it goes.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. Nothing you can do about that.
Yeah,
not
at all.
Well, look, I'm away next week, so
Yep.
We're recording all of you this week for the next 2 weeks. This will go out on Thursday. But when I get back, as I said, I want to record all of you together. So you'll be very near the end. So I look forward to that. And so I'll speak to you in a couple of weeks' time, okay?
That sounds awesome. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, buddy. Take it easy, okay?
Yep. See ya. Bye-bye.
Cheers then. Bye. He's staying in the ski resort. That is living. And of course, catching up with his wife after about 4 months must have been emotional for both of them. You really need to set expectations before you head out on a long trail, because the emotional tug of war that a lot of us experience out there is visceral. So make sure that you at least talk about that separation before you go. And I totally understood what he meant when he talked about not being ready to be done. You want to finish, you want to see your family, but you're enjoying it all so much, and you often feel conflicted. So it can be a bit bittersweet when it's over. Now, somebody who is with her husband out on trail, so she doesn't have to worry about any of that for now. Let's catch up with Sandra Lee, or Lemonade.
Hello.
Good morning, Sandra. How are you?
Good morning, Steve. I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
I've been meaning to ask you, is it Sandra, because I know you spell Sondra, or is it Sandra? How do you pronounce it?
It's Sandra. More of a long O, like Sonic. I guess.
Okay. Sonic. Sonic would be a good one, actually. Yeah, nice. So you texted me this morning. Last night you stayed in Daleville.
Yes.
And you're going to start the Triple Crown this morning, which I actually did, the Virginia Triple Crown, that is, which I actually did earlier this year. So it's a very exciting time. What's your plan?
Oh, yeah. So we've been trying to take a look at what, it kind of works on where you could stay and where you could find water. But we are going to be hiking through it. So today we're going to stop just before Tinker Cliffs.
Right.
Only a 9-mile hike, and about a mile into tomorrow's hike, we'll go over Tinker Cliffs. We're hoping it's a beautiful morning like it is right now.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to it. I've heard you speak fondly of that area, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And then we'll get to McGaffey Knob about 7 miles into tomorrow's hike. And then
Don't do it. Do a shorter hike and go. There's a shelter which we just stopped at. It wasn't in our plan, but we did this. We stopped just north of McAfee Knob, so it was about I think 0.8 of a mile to the top, and we were up there for sunrise, which is will knock your socks off. Of all the things you've seen so far, this is going to knock them into a cock's hat. It's absolutely amazing.
Wow.
But, it depends what you want to do, obviously. But, but if you're in a hurry, do what you're going to do. But I tell you, it is such an awesome sight, whether it's good weather or bad weather. I'm sure, just to see the sunrise is just going to be awesome up there. And it'll give you the picture you'll have the rest of your life.
Yeah, that's something. Okay, here's the thing we were kind of going round and round about that is we would, in order to get the sunrise, we might need to do a 15-mile day today in order to get the sunrise there. Or we're trying to figure out how to do our food because there's Catawba Grocery and then there's nothing until Pearisburg. So we're trying to balance how long we're out here with how much food we have to carry. We're trying to figure that out. So
well, it's whatever you do, you will cross roads. You can always hitch a lift to get some resupply if you wanted to. I just think having done it twice myself now, I think that that picture at the top of McAfee Knob at sunrise will just. It's just the greatest thing, and it'll be one in your favourites file on your photographs. I tell you.
Okay. We'll have some discussions.
Why not? So since we last spoke, you're actually climbing the Priest, going obviously southbound.
Yes.
How much longer did it last?
Oh my goodness! I when I first started at the Priest, we just finished lunch. It was a wonderful lunch. Had a great break, and I got to an overlook. And I did a really good pace getting that overlook. And then I rested on the call with you. And then I had a mile and a half to go. And it was so difficult.
Bloody endless, isn't it?
It was very difficult. I did rest a lot on the way up. It took me a long time to get up there. But by the time I got to the shelter, it wasn't so bad. And unfortunately, the shelter kind of had a shelter dweller there. So I didn't get over to the logbook just because there was an unusual fella hanging out there. So I chose not to write in there.
Right. Okay.
So
an unusual fella. There you go. Can't beat unusual fellas. And you crossed the James River, which is always that lovely. The footbridge. It's actually the footbridge named after the Foots who built it, or actually got it going anyway.
Yeah, that was interesting that their last name was Foot, kind of like the Len Foot in Georgia is named after someone's Len Foot. But yeah, that bridge is beautiful, and we crossed it in the morning, and it was just the still morning. The water wasn't moving very quickly, so the reflection of the trees on the water, and a train came through. It was a lovely experience crossing the river.
Sure, and I'd forgotten about this, the guillotine, which I didn't remember until I hit it last time. Describe to people what the guillotine is.
The trail, at one point it looks like the trail's entering a tunnel because there's two large rock formations, one to your left, one to your right. And when you look up, there is a rock suspended between the two vertical faces. And when you're going northbound, when you look at that rock that's suspended in the air, it comes down to a point. So it looks like a guillotine. So if something were to happen, it looks like it would come down and slice you. So it was interesting passing underneath that very large boulder that's being held up by the two rock walls. It was a fun little tunnel to go through.
It's funny, actually, even though I know it's been there for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, maybe tens of hundreds of thousands of years, I don't know, but I still hurried through it just in case.
Yeah, there's some rock formations you kind of wonder, like, that could fall any day. Could be 100 years
Absolutely.
from now, 1,000 years from now, or it could be tomorrow.
It could be right now as I walk out.
Right now.
Yeah. So you're more than halfway through the trail.
Yes.
What'd that feel like?
It felt pretty good. Knowing that, to me, the 1,100 mark was a big one. At one point, Trail Horses like, why 1,100? We just celebrated 1,000. I said, no, 1,100. That's half of the trail. It's half of the Appalachian Trail.
Oh,
So that's and it is just to get halfway is a big accomplishment. But it's a really neat feeling. Now it's odd. It was supposed to happen in a 100-mile wilderness for us.
Yeah, well, it's okay.
But it happened in a splendid location. Coal Mountain has some meadows up there, and the view was incredible. It was a beautiful day. There's wildflowers all over the place, and the views go on and on and on. And what's really neat is you could hear civilization as you're hiking, but when you're up there, you just see rolls and rolls of mountains, and it's really neat that there's that many mountains that are untouched still available. And to be hit halfway of the Appalachian Trail at the moment where I'm just awed by the beauty of a location. So it's like, even though you've already done 1,100 miles, there's still things that are just splendid and so much joy in finding along this journey.
I think actually that's quite lovely. You're going to have a memory of that being a beautiful place for your halfway mark. And for some people, the halfway marker is just Blair.
Pennsylvania, a little sign in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I mean, it's great. It feels great to pass it, but to have enjoyed the beauty around you at the same time must have been great. Now, you said something which in the text which kind of surprised me. You said that the budgeting manager in Buena Vista said that they had half the hikers that they usually have this year. So, did he have an explanation for that, do you think? Or maybe there's more competition?
He really doesn't understand why they have half the number of hikers they normally do. He said it's really strange that it was a real surprising statistic. He kind of went over their income. Like normally our income is this level, and we are at half of that this year.
Wow.
I don't think he could really figure it out if it's more hikers or is there more competition. Did people not realize that they do a shuttle? If you stay at the Budget Inn, they'll shuttle you to the trail because it's 5 miles away, or
Sure.
people aren't going to Buena, or they call it
Buena Vista.
Yeah, Buena Vista. So it was just a real surprising statistic. I did hear that some people do hear that there's fewer hikers on the trail this year, like more registered, but they're not seeing as many as that registered. So
maybe a lot of people gave up. Maybe more people gave up this year early. I mean, I'd love to know what the numbers are on that. So I think that's something we should look into when the season's over. Now, this has made me laugh, actually. You said you had a resupply mishap. But in fact, what you mentioned earlier on about doing a longer day to get to just south of Maccabee Knob, which would be about, as you say, a 13-mile day, something like that. You've actually done some quite long miles because of this resupply mishap. So tell us what happened.
Okay. So we really enjoy finding resupplies that are very close to trail.
Sure.
To me, that's kind of a fun thing to do. It's like, hey, instead of, going 5 miles off trail, look at the spot. So Middle Creek Campground was only a mile off trail, 1.5 miles, and it looks like a really neat place to stay. They allow tenting, they have showers, and they have a restaurant. So we decided to skip Glasgow for a resupply, and we were going to hit up this Middle Creek. And the day before we called the campground, we got a notice that they were closed that week. So we already had passed the turnoff for Glasgow, and I really didn't feel like going backwards. We took an inventory of our food and got a little creative, and we figured we could make it in if we did some long days. So normally we've been doing 13s and 15s, and so in this case, between Buena Vista and Daleville, we did a 20, 2 17s, and a 20, then the 5 miles into Daleville. Those are really long for us, at least for me.
That is, you know what? That is a long stretch. Certainly those 4 days to do that, especially 2 20s and 2 17s. But you know what it's done? It means you can do it.
Yes.
You have to manage your hike when you're on it. I think when we spoke before you went out, I said you just need to manage your hike, and whatever comes up, you have to take that into account and then work the problem, don't you? Really?
Yes. Yeah. It was really neat that we kind of worked. We had the problem and we worked it out. We're like, we could do this. Then my feet were kind of mad at me as I came into town, but it was a 5-day mile yesterday and I'm feeling pretty good. I think I'll be all right. We were only going to do 10 today. But yeah, we can manage these longer days. And so I am looking at doing some 17s in this next stretch. Maybe I'm kind of thinking like, I could do 2 long days, then like a 12-mile day and then long day. So I'm going to play around with that and see how my feet recover on trail.
I think it's worth actually mentioning this again, though, to talk about this a bit more. You actually came into Daleville with 1 ramen packet left. So, and I think people... problem solving is all, the Appalachian Trail is all about problem solving. Problems will hit you every single day of the week, and you have to work out how you're going to get around them. You worked out you had to do, let me add it up, 74 miles plus the 5. So 79 miles, including a 5-mile last day. So you really had to work out what you could do to get there, and you got there, and you manage your food in such a way. And that's happening all the time on the trail, perhaps less dramatic than that in some cases, but you're always managing your hike, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. And I've heard you say the perfect resupply is coming into town with a bar of Snickers.
Well, Mike, I doubt if I've ever said I came into town with a bar of Snickers, because I definitely would have had it coming into town.
Exactly.
And you saw a bear. You saw a bear.
Did. Yeah, because you'd asked me last time if I saw a bear in Shenandoah. I'm like, no. And then it was the morning after we crossed over Apple to Orchard Mountain, and we were just, working our way southbound. And normally we don't talk a whole lot on trail, but we were talking at this point. So we must have flushed him out of a bush, and we saw him running up a steep hill away from us. So it's fun seeing a bear when they're running away from you. So he wasn't very close, but it was still so much fun seeing it.
And see a bear in the wild, it's a pretty magnificent creature, isn't it? Its fur is so beautiful, its coat is so beautiful and sleek and glossy.
It was really neat seeing that black fuzzy ball just bounding up the hill. It was really neat.
Awesome. Well, look, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute you should change your plans. By the way, you do what you want to do. But I know when you go past McAfee Knob and it's not sunrise, you're going to think, shit, we should be there at sunrise.
Yeah. And a friend of mine did send me her sunrise photo. She's about a couple days ahead of us, and it was a magnificent photo. Yeah.
Well, look, enjoy it, whatever you do, and we haven't actually spoken to your husband at all. We should kind of have a chat with him at some stage. So should perhaps we do that in the future?
Okay, I think I could get him to do that.
Okay. All right then. Okay, you enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll catch up with you soon. As I said before, we're going to actually have a catch-up show when I get back from my Appalachian Trail trip next week.
Yes. So, I'm excited about your trip.
Yeah, not as excited as I am, trust me. Anyway, all right. And, okay, Sandra, good to speak to you, and we'll catch up soon.
All right. Thank you, Steve.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Sandra's such a positive soul, isn't she? I know that they're not going to finish their through hike this year, but the possibilities still remain, and she seems to be having a ball. Perhaps I shouldn't have planted the idea of sunrise at McAfee Knob in mind, because she's made her plans, but as you could tell, that is an experience, a true platinum experience that is worth a change of plans. So I thought I'd put it out there. As you know, I did the Virginia Triple Crown this year with friends, and for a moment, I nearly didn't get up early for the sunrise because I'd done it before. Of course, I was 100% wrong, and I eventually dragged my sorry ass out of bed and was so glad that I did. Don't miss it if you ever get the chance. And I love that they worked the problem. Changing your miles on the fly, where you need to do certain miles to get to a resupply spot, that's a good indication of how well they're managing their hike. Good for them. Last up in the group today, David Vose, or Professor Milkshake, made contact, and though the sound isn't great, I'm glad we caught up. Here's the Professor.
Hello?
Professor Milkshake, how are you?
Hey, Steve. Good, how are you?
I'm not too bad. Let me just turn the volume up here. There you go. Right. Yeah, I'm afraid when we recorded the other day, I totally lost one side of the conversation. I didn't even check which one it was. I only had one track, so I was stuffed. So here we are again. We're going to have the conversation we had the other day. Fortunately for you and I, we're both old enough to forget things. So I've totally forgot what we what we talked about the other day. But I've got some notes, so that should help. You sent me a text. Well, first tell us where you are right now.
I am between Gentian Pond Shelter and Full Goose Pond Goose Shelter.
Right.
So we're the second day out of Gorham, heading north. Tomorrow we're going to stage ourselves at Full Goose tonight to hit the Notch, Mahoosic Notch, and Mahoosic Arm in the morning.
Yeah, yeah. How cool, eh? So, I mean, you're getting there. I mean, you're into Maine. How'd that feel, crossing into Maine?
Great, and muddy. The sign is stuck in a pile of rocks in a big bog of mud. So,
it could be a sign of things to come.
Yeah, and this 10-mile stretch has been really challenging. Vertical rock faces with steel bars in it and all kinds of bogs, and it's been really challenging. And we're just doing 10 miles, but it's taking it out of us.
Well, you know what? It's meant to. Your preparation for these next couple of weeks is what you've done so far. Including the whites as well. So, it is what it is, isn't it, really? And I want to talk to you really more about what you did the other day, which was the Wildcats and the Carters. So now, for those of people who don't do this trail, tell us about the Wildcats particularly.
They are a challenge. You go up out of Pinkham Notch and you just go up and up and up. And
it's not a gradual. It's not a gradual up, is it? You're really going up, aren't you?
You really are, and it's true that in New Hampshire there are no switchbacks. Because they just aim for the top, and and I think I told you that we stayed at the Barn Hostel in Gorham. Yeah. And Paul, the guy who runs it, said that he recommends people going Nobo or Sobo, that they approach it from the south, because coming down off that from the north, he said he's taken a lot of bad injuries off the trail. So I'm sure.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, you're now at the stage of hiking where you are actually leaning behind yourself sometimes to let yourself down by the roots of the tree above, aren't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Particularly today. I mean, I think more than any other section of the trail so far, this has been the most vertical we've seen. And there's either a steel handle or the trail provides you a tree or a root, and there's always something there to help you.
And of course, it's even more dangerous if it rains. I mean, you've had rain, but how's it been recently?
Well, today is the first day, I think, since I've been in New Hampshire where I've actually had views, and it's an amazing day today. I can see almost for forever in every direction. So Nice. It's been the best day so far. But it's been very damp.
Maybe you're set you're set fair for a few days. It's nice to look in the forecast and see you've got at least say 5 or 6 days without waking up to pack up in the cold and the wet. Yeah. So
it's going to be a good weekend, and I don't know beyond that. So
yeah, well, you know what, you can't plan that far ahead, especially the weather is what the weather is, isn't it? And as we said before, you do 6 months on a trail, 5 months on a trail, you're going to have all sorts of weather, so you'll get the full gamut. So what you're hiking with a couple of other guys. How are they? A couple of other people. How are they getting? How do they cope with the Wildcats and the Carters?
They did fine. They're amazing. We're all about 60, and we really, compared to the younger folks around us, I'm amazed that we're doing what we're doing. Sometimes people really bite off a lot and they regret it. Yeah. They're people that have big plans and they execute them, but then they need to take a day or two off, and we're just more consistent, I think.
How many days have you taken off?
Oh boy, since the beginning.
Yeah.
Excluding 2 weeks that I had to take off for tendonitis.
Yeah.
I've probably taken 7 zeros, I think.
That's not bad, is it? That's fine. Over that period of time. So, yeah. Do you feel? Yeah. Do you feel like you live in the woods these days?
I do. Although I have to say that in New Hampshire, my brother lives in New Hampshire, so he slack packed me 2 days. I stayed with him.
Uh-huh.
Then we did 2 work for stays.
Right.
And then we were in 2 different hostels. So I don't know that I used my tent more than 3 nights in New Hampshire.
Oh, wow. Wow.
But I'm glad to be back out here and, staying in shelters or using my tent. And that's the way it's going to be for the rest of the trip.
Yeah. Not long now. But before we get to the end, talk about what you've been through before the Wildcats and the Cardinals, because you've done the Whites as well. And in fact, I think the last time I'm not sure when we last recorded. I think it was Massachusetts, maybe it was Vermont. I'm not sure. But you passed into New Hampshire, so I think basically you've done New Hampshire since we last spoke. How did you get on in the Whites? Sorry, David. In fact, before the Whites, how about Moosaluk? Did you enjoy Moosaluk? 'Cause I loved it myself.
Oh, yeah. It was so much fun. Moosaluk and the Kinsmans, hairy, of course, and challenging, but it was so much fun. And unfortunately, no views at all on either of those. But yeah, tons of fun. And then we got into Lincoln and stayed at the Notch, and then we went on into the rest of the Whites. And that was great. We did 2 work for stays.
All right. Talk us through work for stay as an old guy.
Well, the first one was Lonesome Lake, which is great. It's a beautiful setting, and I did that with a guy named Tree Licker. And then I hooked up with my buddies here when we got to Lake of the Clouds, and they only had 2 spots open.
Oh.
And we tried to talk them into taking 3 of us, but they took 2, so one of us, and it wasn't me, had to stay in the dungeon for a night.
Did you? By the way, did you go in the dungeon to check it out?
I did, yeah, and it's brutal.
I've never actually been in it. I never even saw it. I was lucky enough to get work for the same both times. So, what was it like in there?
Well, it's in so the hut has a stone foundation, and this is in a corner of the foundation. And it has a big steel plate door with 6 bunks in it, and 2 of the bunks are very close to the ground, so they say that they ice up a lot. They weren't iced up when we were there. But it's essentially a place when hikers are kind of in extremis out in the elements. You need a place to go. It's available to them. But they put 2 hikers in there during the season. If you get up there and there's no work for stay open. So. And
he volunteered. Yeah. He volunteered, did he?
He actually did, yeah, and he's been milking it ever since.
Yeah, damn right, yeah. But you should tell him. There shouldn't be any more problems after that. So good to go. And how did you find? You stayed at 2 of the huts, so you obviously didn't stay at all the others. So did you find some decent stealth camping sites?
No, actually, we've been staying in shelters just because of the weather.
Okay.
It's just nice to get up in the morning and get going without having to deal with the wet tent. And the way we've been planning our days, the shelters fall just about perfect.
Right,
so,
nice.
The days have been wet, but the nights have been dry. And
what about the work for stay? Because, I remember I was scrubbing a pan, which looked worse after I scrubbed it for about half hour than it was when I started. So what was your work for stay? What did you have to do?
Sweep the floor and wipe down the tables.
That's not bad. That is not bad.
It's not bad. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, privileged.
Yeah.
Do you tell them you're a professor? Do you tell them you're a professor?
I gave him my name, yeah.
There you go. Professor himself. So, David, you're obviously thinking about the end, I presume, in some fashion. Now you're in the last state. How many miles are you on? You've just into Maine. You've probably got about 250 to go, 240, something like that.
We're at we'll be at 225 tonight, I think, something like that.
Right. So have you got in your mind a date you're going to finish?
We're looking at around the 15th of September.
And how's that fit in with you and your plans of needing to get back?
Just about perfect.
Wow.
I have to return to work a week later, so.
Impressive timing.
Should be just about right.
Impressive timing. I mean, that is super impressive. And have you felt that you've been chasing it, or because you needed to get back, or have you felt quite comfortable for the last couple of months because you knew where you were in relation to the end?
There was a little stretch where I was a little worried, but I think at this point now I have to average 10 miles a day, which is going to be extremely easy to do.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried at all, and I really want to enjoy the last.
Good. Good. I'm glad you are.
Here, so.
Okay, well, I'm going to be on the same trail as you, but about 2,000 miles behind you next week, because I'm going to the approach trail and then the first 27, 30 miles, something like that. But the week after, I want to have a show where all 5 of you talk. It's basically a class of 24 catch up, and we'll catch up then, okay?
Okay, super. Good.
Okay, man.
Thanks.
Well, you take it easy and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, thanks. You too.
Cheers, David. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
He's in such an epic area right now, having done Moosilauke and the Wyatts, then the Wildcats and the Carters. That's what New Hampshire's all about. It's funny, having hiked it first in 2014, everything was new to me, so it all unfolded in front of my ignorant eyes. Yet, the second time, I knew exactly what to expect. It didn't make it any easier, but I knew what I was heading into. Personally, I found that to be an advantage. It's a shame that the professor didn't get any views, but as always happens, he's getting them now. The AT will give you what it wants to give you. We just need to be ready to receive whatever it throws at us. Remember, next week will be a full catch-up show with the Mighty Blue class of 2024, and some of the guys will be very close to the end, so I hope you'll be listening to cheer them home. Finally, Emily takes on the second half of the Smokies and discovers that her nerves when she went into the park have gone by the time she emerges from it. That's kind of how these things work. I'll see you next week. Before I'd left the shelter that morning, I'd said goodbye to Carl, Walking Man, Fruit Smoothie and Pumpkin Butt. I was going to spend the night with my friends in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and the others were going to hike on. We would meet again if it was meant to be. I no longer felt threatened by the Smokies. I was over halfway through them, and I felt quite confident in my abilities. Besides, there were so many nice people on the trail, and we all looked out for each other in one way or another. First off to Gatlinburg, Tennessee for a quick tour. Jimmy and I believe wanted to show me the sights. There was an outfitter in town, and every other tourist trap venue you could think of. It was wall-to-wall people and cars, my favourite things, not. But I do love to go to outfitters. I didn't need more stuff to carry, but it was fun to shop and make sure I wasn't missing out on anything. Inside the store, we found Pumpkin Butt and Fruit Smoothie. She was in desperate need of a new pair of shoes. From there, the two were going to hitch a ride to the grocery store at the other end of town. Since I also need to go to the grocery store, we waited for them so they didn't have to thumb it. After lunch, we stopped at a little winery that offered samples. I believe wanted to pick up a gift for a mum, and I was up for a little taste testing. While the sibling duo sorted their food on the curb, I believe and I went inside. I'd never done a wine sampling before, and I was excited to do something new. Who knew there was so much more to a through hike besides hiking? I believe chose a couple of samples that looked good, and when they asked for our IDs, they refused mine. It had expired. I knew that. I was carrying my old one so that I wouldn't lose my new one. I never thought I would need it for drinking purposes, since that wasn't a high priority on my list of things to do. I didn't think I even looked close to 30 years young, but the state of Tennessee apparently has a 100% photo ID check for the purchase of alcohol. So much for trying something new. The kids were going to hitch a ride back to Newfound Gap to continue hiking, but they were not quite done repacking their food. Since we were going in the opposite direction, we could not give them a ride. I believe and I did help them make a sign to hold. Traffic was heavy and their luck at catching a ride would be good, providing there were locals out driving. Most tourists do not stop. The sign was made and I believe and I held it up for the kids while they continued their chores. Car after car went by without so much as a look. We were close to a traffic signal which made it hard for drivers not to notice us, but they still ignored us. One car even pulled over into the other lane to keep from having to make eye contact. I believe and I were unsuccessful at snagging a ride for the kids. At least we had made the sign. We left them to try their own luck and we headed to our hotel in Pigeon Forge. I was due for a hot shower, my own repacking before supper, and bed. I really loved what the trail had to offer. Hiking was my favourite part, and that day seemed so easy. I was getting stronger each day. My knee was doing so much better with the addition of a knee brace, and my feet had even been agreeable. The views were also spectacular. At one point, I was getting visual stimulus overload. The only thing better than the hike and sights was the people with whom I was enjoying it all. If for some reason my journey had to end there, I would have felt successful, but no such thing was happening. In the next 2 days, I covered 34 miles. The first day out of Newfound Gap, I did just under 16 miles and ended at Tri-Corner Knob Shelter. The guidebook noted the shelter held 12. This was always a conservative number. Over time, I noticed the max occupancy of any given shelter was always relative to the weather. Hikers have a way of making a sardine can roomy enough for whoever wants in. That night, Tri-Corner Knob Shelter slept well over the suggested occupancy. The 2 wooden levels were full, as well as the dirt area in front of the regular sleeping area. In the Smokies, a tarp is secured to the open side of the building, making it more weatherproof. We greatly appreciated it that night. About 9 p.m, a raging thunderstorm broke out, thrashing and howling all night. It was the worst storm I had ever been in. It was also my first storm at over 5,900 feet elevation. I'm sure the elevation has something to do with it. The thunder sounded alive as it boomed, sending shockwaves that you could hear and feel. We felt safe inside the shelter, but one is never really safe in a structure unless it's grounded. I was truly scared for those who had decided to set up camp outside. The second day after Newfound Gap, I whipped out my longest day yet, 18.4 miles. It was a high-paced trekking event, and I loved every step of the way. Each step I took brought me closer to seeing Bruce. I woke at 6 a.m. and was on the trail before dawn, this 6:45 a.m. start being my earliest yet. Breakfast was fast food, a Pop-Tart, gluten-free, of course. I finally had the courage to head out while the sun was still sleeping. My headlamp barely guided my way. It was rather difficult to see the markings on the trees. The 90 lumens on my headlamp were not quite bright enough to give me the confidence to trek at full speed. It was probably a good thing I was visually impaired by the darkness. I think the trail went straight up. I wasn't sure because I couldn't see, but my huffing and puffing with frequent rests told me this was probably true. Usually, I study the guidebook to have some inclination about the morning hike, but I had not done so that morning. If I would have, the map would have shared a secret. I will be climbing 400 feet over a very short distance. Hiking solo was relaxing. I could go at my own pace, take pictures when I wanted to, rest when I wanted to, and pray. I developed a nice routine each morning. The first 20 minutes or so I spent adjusting to the day's weather. I was always dressed too warm when I started out. Like clockwork, within a short time, I needed to delayer. I tried a few times to start without my coat, but I couldn't. It was just too cold, and when I'm cold, I tense up, which causes a headache, which usually turns into a migraine. After my morning fashion show of changing clothes on the wilderness runway, I pared down to my normal attire. Once I was stretched and warm, I would say my prayers. I'd have a conversation with God, then end with a meditation on the rosary. I no longer had my beads because I had given them to midnight, but I had fingers to help keep count and an app on my phone. I may have been hiking solo, but I was far from being alone. I leapfrogged with several hikers throughout the day. At one point, I came upon Fruit Smoothie and Pumpkin Butt. They were resting in the sun next to a wide, swollen stream we needed to cross. The water was crystal clear and flowing fast. Once on the other side, I dropped my pack and undressed my feet. I too enjoyed a rest and a soak in the cold water to soothe my aching knee and feet. Then a little nap in the sun was just the right ingredient to help me reach hubby by day's end. I was excited to see Bruce. It felt like I was getting ready for a date. No fancying up though. Just a wash in the stream would have to do. But there were several miles to go, so another layer of sweat and grime would accumulate. I arrived at my extraction point where the AT crossed Green Corner Road, also the location of Standing Bear Farm Hostel. I was not going to the hostel. Instead, Bruce was going to whisk me away to a hotel. It was 3:45 in the afternoon. I'd done the 18.4 miles in record time, for me. I was ready for the day to end and our date to start. It didn't matter to me that our date was just a rescue from the woods. Our dates were always simple anyway. Seldom were they grand and over the top, but that's probably what made them so special, the simplicity of them. I remember one date early on. We had planned a dinner in. I was cooking. He even brought flowers. How sweet. Back then, a popular TV show was Dallas, a primetime soap opera about a slick-dealing oil tycoon family led by JR, who, in a cliffhanging episode, were shot by an unknown person. The headlines back then were, "Who shot JR?" This particular date was to consist of dinner and watching the video recordings of Dallas episodes Bruce had missed while at school. His family loved this show and would watch it together. I didn't really care for television, and I could only handle about one episode. After enduring all I could, I requested the entertainment to be changed to something more interesting. He was agreeable to pleasing me and said something on the lines of, "Sure, what do you have in mind?" My response, "I have some videos of me playing soccer." He was game, so there we sat on the couch and watched me, my favourite subject. I'm sure he would have preferred catching up on his Dallas drama, but he was already showing signs of a loving, caring and appeasing character that was so darn attractive to me. He is still just as wonderful now as he was back then. To this day, I still do not know who shot JR. Bruce had not arrived yet, so I spread out my sit-upon, the piece of Tyvek I believe had given me for a ground cloth. I hung out on the side of the road, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the success of a wonderful day of hiking. While I was doing so, I looked up the road and saw Carl and Walking Man making their way back to the trail. They had stopped for lunch at the hostel. Lunch wasn't the only item served. They said they were able to taste some of Tennessee's finest home brew of White Lightning. I bet this backwoods brewery didn't card them. It was a treat to see my hiking buddies unexpectedly. I didn't think I'd catch up to them, but now I was heading off trail and would see them down the road after my date. April the 4th marked the end of my journey through the Smokies. I was blessed with great weather, except for the one storm. But even so, I had found the Smokies to be beautiful and much easier than I originally perceived. In fact, I finished them one day faster than planned. I'd been so worried and scared about that section, but it ended up being so grand. Sometimes our fears can be crippling when we try to tackle them on our own. But with the help of prayers, a good attitude and action, my fears did not stand a chance of ruining my journey through those mountains. I was living my mantra poem and didn't even realise it. You gain strength, courage and confidence by every experience in which you really stop to look fear in the face. You must do the thing which you think you cannot do. Eleanor Roosevelt.